So again, thank you so much for joining us on this, we are Tuesday, right? Today is still Tuesday. On this Tuesday of Miami Art Week that feels unlike any other art week I've ever experienced. So happy that we're in this together. You know, we started this conversation, or rather Mikhaile and I talked about wanting to create a space where we can be curious and learn and talk about collecting and artists together. And so, of course, with this idea in mind, we had to partner up with Lauren from Namdi Contemporary and Tiana Webb Evans from Yard Concepts. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction of everybody before I pass it to Mikhaile, who will take us on a tour of Prism, which today opened. Congratulations, Mikhaile.
Thank you, Dejha.
So she is our fierce leader, a founder, director of Prism Art Fair, which is now in its 9th year and has been representing and elevating the voices of artists of color. Truly a cutting edge fair, one of my favorites. Namdi is Lauren is the co-owner of Namdi Contemporary, which has a gallery with roots in Detroit and has since expanded to Miami and has roots now here, and it's been almost 8 years. I think the gallery has a reputation for fusing the masters with mid-career and contemporary artists, and has often been paying attention to artists for a very long time before anybody else has. So really excited to ask more questions about that in a bit. And Tiana is a writer, a curator, a cultural producer, a media guru, an amazing human, who is also the founder of Yard Concepts, which is a platform focused on cultural investigation and collective consciousness. If you go to her website, there's some beautiful and really thoughtful writing. There's a gallery, and among many of the offerings are these reading circles, which I will later encourage all of you to attend. So with that, I think I'm gonna pass it back to Mikhaile, who can kick us off with more about Prism.
Thank you so much, Dejha. That was like an amazing introduction. I want to thank everybody for being a part of this conversation tonight. I'm sure you could be doing a lot of things during Miami Art Week, but you decided to be here with us tonight. So we really appreciate you being here. So I think I'll just maybe start by giving you a very quick overview of what Prism is. Prism is an art fair that focuses on exhibiting and celebrating African and African diaspora contemporary artists. This is our 8th year of hosting the exhibition. We're sad that it couldn't be in person as it typically is, so that we can enjoy each other's company. But the good thing about it this year is we have a virtual fair, which you all can enjoy from the privacy of your own home. And I guess what I could do is just sort of navigate you or show you how you should be navigating the art fair online. And I'll select a couple artists that are near and dear to me. Some, I think I saw Milena and Nugent in the chat. So we'll go through their entries specifically since they're here in person. And then if anybody has any questions about the platform later on after the full talk, I'm more than happy to answer them. So if you wouldn't mind taking a look at the shared screen. Can everyone see it? Just give me a thumbs up. Okay, cool. Awesome. So this is your home page for the fair. You can see our programming. So if like tonight's talk, for instance, is here on the side, that's how you would see, oh, what happened here? Oops, sorry guys. Not sure what happened there. 1 second. There we go. So the programming is available here on the side. And then when you scroll to this little button, this is our black sun, as I like to call it. It's our animated sun, around which everything revolves. And when you press it, that's where you get your navigation menu. You go to Fair Directory and you click on Artists. and you will get a full list of all the artists that are participating in the fair. When you hover over the actual links, you get to see a snippet of the artist's work. But then when you click on the artist, it takes you to their full entry. This is Idris Habib. He is represented by Band of Vices in Los Angeles, California. You click on the image, you get a much larger view of the work. I feel like the largest of the imagery makes it feel like you're right in front of it, so you can kind of see all the details of the work. And then if you're interested in acquiring the work, you press on the acquire button and you have the option. And incidentally, this is a work that's sold today. So, you get to purchase directly from the platform. Let's take a look at Nugent's work, shall we? So if we go ahead, you can also search for the artist. So you type in Nugent, his name comes up, and there is Nugent's work. And you click on Nugent's name, his listings come on the page, and there you have Nugent's work. Now, if you don't know Nugent, Nugent is an incredible artist. He's Haitian Trinidadian, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nugent, but I'm pretty sure that is your heritage. And Nugent is both a performance artist and a visual artist. Oops, forgive me, guys. Somebody was calling me. He is both a visual artist and a performing artist. Nugent actually has done a number of performance art pieces with us at Prism back in 2016 and 2017. Unfortunately, and this is in remembrance of Marvin, one of Nugent's collaborators, Marvin Fabian, who is from Martinique, suddenly passed away this week. So I definitely want to remember him for the work that he's done, collaborating with Nugent, but overall his practice was very important to the performance art discourse. But Nugent's work pays very close attention to the issues that are affecting the Caribbean, particularly issues of displacement, issues of colonization, issues of emergency. How perhaps our so-called allies are sort of neglectful of their responsibility to the Caribbean when a tragedy happens, like hurricanes and earthquakes, etc. His work is laden with conversations around those issues. And he also did a performance piece with Marvin at the Perez Art Museum last year that I unfortunately missed, but I know that it was spectacular. So that's Nugent's work. Definitely somebody you should keep on your radar. He's a graduate of the Art Institute in Chicago. His work is very compelling. And then let's look at Milena's photograph, shall we? Let's go back. Milena Carranza. Milena is from Peru. Her work is very spiritual, I find, and she herself is of mestizo heritage. And in these photographs that are featured in the fair this year, she documented a specific ritual act that happens every year in Peru that is paying homage to the dead. In my understanding and speaking with her through this ritual, this is how the living keep their ancestors alive through this ritual. There's also video work that goes along with the body of work that she's presented at the fair this year. So I think both Nugent and Milena have very interesting practices. Most of the artists in our fair are from the Caribbean, but we also have artists who are from the continent itself. And doing the fair online has actually given us more of an ability to engage the continent in ways that we would prefer to be doing. A lot of times when you're hosting the fair, these large fairs, the cost of shipping and all of those things are very prohibitive. And us doing the fair online gives us the opportunity to connect with our colleagues on the continent and share the work over there with the rest of the world, with us here in the United States. So I will show you an artist from the continent whose work I actually really love. His name is Stenjwa Luthuli. Stenjwa is from Durban, South Africa. And he makes these incredible prints. This is I guess the process, I want you all to understand the process of this. So think of a big, large wood block, and he carves out the relief and creates the stamp that creates this print. And so I remember going to a studio in Durban earlier this year before COVID happened. And he showed me the wood blocks that he creates. And I'm like, my God, this is intense. So I immediately fell in love with his work when I saw his studio practice. And his works are fairly affordable considering the actual process that it takes to make these works, I find. And I find that the imagery is very positive. It shows the connectedness of African people. I'll show you another piece. It's just really captivating, I find, visually. So yes, I think that's the tour of the website. It's very easy to navigate, I think. If anybody has difficulty with navigating the website, please let me know. You have the fair directory. In about a day or two, the galleries directory will connect directly to the artists who are represented by the galleries. These artists will be linked directly to their artist profile. So we're working on getting that functionality up as well. So you can see the full list of all the art galleries that are participating. And if you click on View of Gallery, you will get the full list of artists that are participating with that gallery. So, yeah. So I think that's a tour of the fair online. If anybody has any questions after we go through the conversation, please let me know.
Thanks so much, Mikhaile. I mean, we just want to keep on going. I want to ask the group, put a thumbs up for all the first-time collectors in the room. Who has never purchased any art before? Okay, fantastic. So we got to get you into it. Rodney, right? Jillian. Okay. And who would still consider themselves a beginner collector? Put a thumbs up if you still consider yourself a beginner collector. Fantastic. Well, this is great for us to know because we set this up specifically to be in conversation with each other so that if you have any questions as we start talking, if you have any questions at all, you can just interject, put a question in the chat, or just like wave your hands frantically and we'll stop, right? And just talk about it because, you know, one of the things we absolutely want to do is just get people collecting this beautiful work. Prism is very different in that most fairs only work directly with galleries. Prism also works with artists. And so, Mikhaile, I was wondering, you know, in this process of curating the fair in these pandemic times, what have you seen really shift? How are artists sustaining themselves? What are some of the major trends or changes that you've been seeing with artists?
So there's a number of organizations, I think, that have understanding the tenuousness of our current situation. They have stepped up to kind of provide, I guess, their version of relief. Some have pulled together funds for artists, unrestricted funds that artists can just apply to. There are other platforms similar to Prism that do offer opportunities for artists to participate, whether it be in exhibitions where the proceeds go directly to the artist. I think people are finding innovative ways to address the moment. And I found in speaking with artists directly that some are doing quite well. Others might need a little more support than others. But I think there's like all of the platforms that we have, like Yard and Jamani's space and Lauren's space, have a purpose of providing support to artists year round. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think there are a number of opportunities that exist for artists to sort of sustain themselves, even though things are slightly off kilter right now.
Yeah. What are you seeing, Lauren?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had a quick question for Mikhaile. So like after the fair, if people are still interested in some of the artwork, like maybe it's sold out, like how would they, reach out to you? Like how do they start engaging to get more into collecting and, with what you've kind of presented, at Prism this year?
Yeah, so if work, for instance, doesn't happen to be available, I'm always happy to connect collectors or interested collectors with artists. I do that often, even when the fair is not happening. I oftentimes connect collectors who've said they've seen artwork at the fair in the past and they would like to acquire the work, but don't know how to reach the artist. Sometimes I will make that introduction, or I will, actually sell the work for the artist independently of the fair happening. We've sold work that way several times this year. So I'm very open to consulting and speaking with individuals about how to collect work outside of the auspices of the actual formal fair.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is good to know because y'all heard it here first that Mikhaile will help you get all the artwork you need. But you do too, Lauren. I'm really curious to see what trends you've been seeing with the artists that you work with and kind of like how you're seeing the market shift.
Sure. Again, so thank you so much for having me, and it's great to see everyone and some familiar faces. So for us, we're a resource, and we're always here to help young collectors, old collectors. Right now behind me we have a show by Rashawn Rucker, Contemplation of Flight. And, due to COVID, obviously, we're not having a huge celebration. So our platform for the last two shows have been virtual. And so we've been able to reach, as kind of Mikhaile was saying, your audience gets much broader because, the YouTube, the visuals can expand miles and continents. So you're touching so many more people, I feel, and the work is getting more recognition. It's getting more eyes on them, on the artist. And I think it's just been really important that we had to shift during this time to make sure we're still exposing, because everyone's still got to eat. The artists are creatives and they need a story to tell, and we are here to, promote them. And I think this is just kind of really important time, that we're facing, but they've still been able to share their stories, and the stories are, getting richer and richer because now we're a little more insular, more thought, and time to ourselves to really think about, where we are in this world. So I think the work that we're seeing that's coming out is just really dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And T, I want to ask the same question of you. I mean, your world is design, it's visual art, and I feel like you have a unique sensibility around finding artists and then connecting people and bringing things to life. I'm wondering how the flow has been for you and the artists that you work with.
Well, what's interesting, I think this is strangely a transformative time. When it comes to the artists that we've been in community with, a lot of people are on very kind of specific trajectories, and that sort of historic coming together of the quote unquote mainstream art world and the Black art market over the last couple of years have changed many, many practices. And there are a lot of eyes on our artists, and things like social media has sort of catapulted people because you have established collectors who are looking at and tracking people that they know that are in the space of Pan-African art, specifically, in African art specifically. So I found that a lot of the artists that I'm in community with are doing really, really well right now, because people, as to Lauren's point, people have time, not only the artists have time to contemplate their surroundings and themselves, everyone else does. And I find that that curiosity has been piqued by a number of factors, the heightened awareness of our experience here. We also have the fact that there are a number of visual artists who've ended up on the covers of magazines. I think of a homegrown talent like Arbisa Butler, who has had an extraordinary run right now. And I'm in a community of, sort of African-American professionals where I am, and she's on the top of everyone's mind. But now people I've been in community with for 20 years are now asking about collecting in a more serious way. So I found that the artists, the ones who are able to engage digitally, have found new pockets of success and support during this time.
We have a question in the chat around the intimacy of the art experience. One of my favorite things is going into the studio and seeing the process and listening to the stories and being able to get super close to the artist. Andrew McNeil is asking us, is there a place where the artist's stories and processes can accompany their work? Yeah.
What's really interesting, I'm a very tactile kind of process-driven person, the person who still carries large books around in her handbag and things like that. So at first I was very resistant to, the idea of Zoom and these platforms. But the studio visits that I've been able to do via Zoom now are international, and it's never going to be the same as standing next to an artist, connecting with someone's energy, really sort of feeling that energetic volt. Anyone who has been collecting knows that there's a rational part, but there's a visceral part of it. When I find something that I like, it's like I'm breaking out in a cold sweat. Like I know, but Zoom does help people discover from the privacy of their own home. Sometimes you have organizations, whether it's Prism or Namdi or Commissioner or Yard, where we're bringing people into these sort of intimate spaces. And it's a great way to sort of train yourself on the studio visit process. So I do think this is a wonderful time to join a group that is collecting, connect with an advisor, join sort of a gallery program, so you have access. Absolutely. So I think we have more access, strangely, this way.
Lauren and Tiana, you said something earlier that really moved me about how artists who previously, had some energy around them are now really at the forefront. People like Bisa Butler, folks who weren't really in the mainstream before. And it reminds me of this article by Roberta Smith that said that Black art is finally having its moment. Y'all, I was livid because so many people, including Namdi contemporary, have been paying attention to folks like Ed Clark even before they had the museum shows. Sure. Lauren, maybe you can speak a little bit about this, because I feel like you probably have many people coming through your doors saying this artist is hot, and you've been knowing they were hot.
Yeah. Mikhaile and I kind of had this conversation a few weeks ago, like, they're thinking people have like emerged, but these, like what she was referring to, Ed Clark, Frank Bowling, Al Loving, these people have had, their resumes are pages long, and my father-in-law, who started the gallery in 81 in Detroit, had been representing these artists because, these are beautiful, abstract, contemporary artists that are telling our story, but through a brushstroke, a large push broom, or wrap tubes, they're using like innovative materials to show our story, but no one was really paying attention. Now all of a sudden it's just like, oh my God, I didn't even know they existed, So then all of a sudden when the masses, become aware of it, then the price point goes up and it becomes almost intangible to a collector. It's millionaires, now that have to collect this body of work, when before it was just because they're telling an interesting story through a different medium that we never really thought about. So it's fascinating, like 2015 when Norman Lewis's piece went for auction for like $1 million, I was like, oh, here we go. This is, people are ready to play, it's a whole new ball game now. So
Mikhaile, have you seen Prism's audiences change? Do the people on the Zoom call look a bit different than they did 8 years ago? Tell us about the trajectory.
Yeah, I mean, this is the group that we have on the Zoom now. This is kind of like what Prism is made for. It's made to engage folks who are interested in collecting, who want to learn more about collecting, who want to become collectors themselves. And it's not the same, I guess 1% that's been propping up the art market for however long. It's about expanding the art market and including more people and more participants in the art market. And I think programs like Commissioner are so important to that. I think that Lauren's program at the Namdi Gallery are so important to that. Tiana's program with Yard Concepts is so important. I think we're essentially building a coalition of organizations that really help people connect to art differently as well. I think the way in which we present the stories of the artists that we do work with to the masses, really, because quite frankly, sometimes the art market has a way of not being completely transparent. We do that. We create a transparency. We eliminate whatever filters there are, and we give people the authentic. We want people to have an authentic experience. And so yes, I think the audience has changed vastly through our program. And that's what we want to continue cultivating. We want to make sure that if anybody has questions about artwork, they feel like there is no barrier, there's no sort of, pretense in their conversations and relationship with us.
I think about too, we went to school with Derek Forjor and Amy Sherrill. They were art majors when we were all together, and they were highly talented at that point, kind of way beyond my skill level at the time. But, that was 20 years ago, and now they're truly like seeing some, Amy has propelled herself too, but it's like they're seeing popularity, they're seeing their price points, just really escalate. They're famous now, in a sense, but they've been doing this practice for a very long time, so wish I had collected them back then, a little sketch or something, but.
The ones who got away, that's like,
right.
That's a forever story. I think, one of the things that really excites me in terms of Yard, I feel like Yard is a bit about slow collecting, it's about creating the language around collecting, cultivating the eye, understanding why it's important. We aren't gallery forward in terms of our process is really like, a lot of galleries have a very strong program and then they will develop context after that, whether it be journals or groups or events. We're sort of journal forward, and the people who end up collecting with us come to us through these kind of happenings and experiences. But one of the things that, is very important to me, and kind of what I call my practice, which is a social practice, is how I engage with the ladies on this panel, is really about creating this historical narrative, understanding that, you know, what Black abstraction meant at the time, what those challenges were, understanding that there was a Kinkelaba Gallery in 1974 and a Peg Alston Fine Arts or a Merton Simpson or Adele Pryor or Nnamdi, like understanding that there has been a market before the larger art market started to sort of enter this space. And one of the things I'm really passionate about is the fact that we need to collect work by artists who look like us, who are telling our stories, because there is an ownership proposition, and who owns those stories matters. You know, so just like Lauren was saying, right now, because Black abstraction has hit a market and a note, you know, I remember one of Adele Pryor's son is a very close friend of mine talking about Al Loving for 20 years now. Or, you know, the fact that Joe Overstreet's abstraction was about jazz and music and notes, and they taught me how to hang shows. There's a legacy that is so rich that we need to tap into. And I always feel like when I say our generation, those folks who are under 60 kind of dropped the ball a little bit, you know, not to call anyone to task, but we were so focused on acquiring, you know, shoes and cars and vacation homes and all of these things. Like, that cultural engagement that was part of a tradition kind of fell by the wayside. So now it's almost an incredible kind of urgency around having people participate in owning our culture and participate in, you know, sort of shepherding that legacy. And I think that's the work that everyone else is doing on this panel, is really trying to get people engaged, so we have later on more of an opportunity to be part of that storytelling. Because if someone else owns our work, they get to build the narratives around that work. And there's a whole power dynamic that's associated with that.
That's right. 100%, everything you just said. And there's so many different ways to collect. You know, there's different financial models, different economic models. There's ways to collect collaboratively on consignment, you know, in tandem with others. And so no matter the price point, you can collect early. You don't have to wait till artists are in vogue to collect them. Often collect them in their studios, because, you know, as culture forward people, that we are often on the forefront of meeting people and working with people and being surrounded by folks who inevitably may end up at the Whitney or at Nnamdi Gallery or at Prism. So I'm going to ask our people a few personal questions. Mikhaile, can you tell us, like, what is your collector story? How do you choose what you're going to buy or what you're going to collect from what you're going to look at? How do you start making these decisions? What does that process look like for you?
I think how I think about work is very much so driven by my own, I guess, personal and aesthetic proclivities. I'm an architect by education, so I am very much so interested in works that are based on concepts of mapping, for instance, or thinking about geographies. Spatial work is very, very enticing to me. So a lot of the work that I do collect are from artists who sort of find ways to render their work through those ideas. One of my favorite works that I collected a couple years ago was actually by Nugent. It was a map of or a reimagined map of the Caribbean through his narrative of I think it was a combination of is it Haiti and another island. The narrative is escaping me right now, but he actually gave the island a whole new name. And so I really love that. And then there are other artists like Olalekan Jayofis, who is himself an architect, whose work, I have not collected his work yet, but it's my intention to collect his work. And his work is he creates these sort of dystopian, but beautiful images of what Africa was in the past or can be in and the more utopian version of what Africa can be in the future. So he had, like when we're talking about Afrofuturism, like Olalekan's work very much so taps into that idea. And then otherwise, I do like figurative work as well. There's an artist that's in the fair this year. His name is Zay Polito. And there's a lot of figurative work out there, right? You know, a lot of artists, particularly from the diaspora, render our bodies and our, and I don't like the word bodies. I find that it's, I know we use it a lot in discourse around the diaspora and our identities, but bodies is a word that really, really bothers me. So I won't use it here. In rendering the African experience and our lives and the spirit in our spirits, I find that there's a number of ways to do that. And oftentimes different artists have a way of rendering or using the medium to express our experiences and our spirits. And oftentimes, for whatever reason, there's some whose figurative renderings more so resonate with me than others. And so Zay is an example of that. I really love the way he renders us. I feel like there's somebody I'm missing, but
I feel like we need to get all of your suggestions emailed to this entire list. That way we can see what the fair director is looking at. I mean, Lauren, I feel like you've been in the art world forever. What did you decide, or how did you decide what was going to be your first piece?
You know, I love large scale pieces. I like texture. I love color. You know, my background is in interior design. So, you know, things that are bringing me joy, sparking some type of happy emotion, you know, that's just kind of what I gravitate to. And, you know, my husband is a avid collector, and I'm usually like, where are we gonna put it? That's basically what our Jemani sending me notes. oh yeah. He's saying, I used to work for Jemani, my father-in-law. And so after my summer of working there, he said he was going to give me like a set of, you know, Ed Clark prints. So I was like, okay. And then I never got them. I was like, what happened to the prints? But now I'm like, okay, I guess married your son. So now we're even, I guess, you know, but yeah, I just, you know, we see something, it's, you know, some artists, you know, we're wanting to collect, but other times, you know, if you're at art fairs or in a city and, you know, you just stop by a gallery, you know, if we like it, it's like, let's do it. You know, it's add a collection, you know, just.
And you, Tiana, I mean, how did this all start for you?
Well, it started 23 years ago. My mother-in-law, my late mother-in-law, who passed away, was part of the Black Arts Movement. So she was represented by Kinkeliba Gallery. And that was it. I mean, you know, I'm the typical Caribbean girl, you know, who wanted to be a doctor, but wanted to own an art gallery since I was 13. Like, this is not, you know, something that is recent. I've, you know, sort of been in this world going on 20 something years now. And in terms of collecting, like I had mentioned before, it's visceral for me. I can wax poetic about, you know, all of the things that you're supposed to check off and do and think about. And I tend to get into those conversations over a certain price point. But mainly I'm telling a story about my travels, my experiences, my relationships. So I tend to end up collecting work from people that I'm in community with, artists that I'm in community with, I'm advising, I'm spending a lot of time and investing energy in, those are usually the people that I end up kind of pulling the trigger. There are those moments where you walk into a fair, you're in a situation and you just can't sleep, like you have to have it. I had that moment with the wonderful Fiorella Baez a couple years ago, where I just couldn't sleep. I needed in, you know. But for the most part, you know, the works that I have range from, you know, there's an abstract piece by Stan Squarewell behind me. I've always been a fan of abstraction. I'm funny enough, ended up in this industry, like I said, a long time ago, but I'm actually trained as a scientist. So there's something about abstraction that resonates with me. I love process-driven work. I need to know that you've kind of, I need to see the hand. And the other thing is that because it's part of my job to identify trends and kind of know what's going on in my other life, I'm sensitive to works that I find that are like derivative, or, you know, yes, everyone is interested in, like, there was a moment that was collage heavy. Now we're in this heavy figuration stage. Unless something is a completely new perspective on a specific medium or process, it's hard to get me excited. So it's a combination of things, but when I know it's actually a spiritual experience. Like I'm unrelenting about it.
You know, maybe about 15 years ago when I was doing work as a publicist, I would promote all of these different exhibitions and shows, and they'd often leave me in the homes of people. And it was just being really nosy and curious and seeing how other people live with art that I started thinking, you know, I wanted to have that too. And then when I started understanding studio visits, that opened up a whole different world, because it was the ability to see the work and to meet the artist and to develop a relationship, understand the story, even before it was in the white cube or in the gallery space. And it was those stories, the ideas of collecting relationships, building relationships, developing a friendship network that really touched me in the way that every time I see a work in my home, I can tell a story about it, or it represents a moment in time that's really, you know, dear to me. But I think, you know, for folks who are joining us today who are just becoming collectors or consider themselves new collectors, what we're all saying is like, buy what you like. Like, we're all talking about identity and values alignment, or the visceral experiences of color and design and abstraction. And, you know, at the end of the day, what this all comes down to is aligning ourselves with the things that move us and worrying about the rest later. I wonder, you know, for our group, do you have any recommendations that you would give novice collectors if they're just new in their journey of collecting?
I'm happy to jump in here. You know, one of the things that's a great pathway, I find so many people are afraid. You know, it is an investment. A lot of people are afraid, but that first one is always, you know, the most exciting, and then it continues from there. But in terms of figuring out what you like, you know, I started buying stuff in my 20s, and now I look at it and I laugh. You know, I would, you know, this is an evolutionary process. It's a process. One of the things I find great joy in is buying art books, going to the exhibitions, going to openings, purchasing catalogs, really sort of looking and sort of getting your feet wet at the same point, understanding like, what is it that you like? You know, going to a gallery, if you have a Namdi gallery, if you have a local gallery that is established, that you see that they're doing exciting things and they're energized and sort of pushing forward into the future, you know, make a relationship. You know, that doesn't have to be the only relationship. If we were in person at Prism, having conversations with the gallerists is really helpful. You know, you could find someone that will end up being your first guide if you really resonate with their program. So with that, it could be the same way online with Prism. If you see someone who's showing a group of artists that's really exciting to you, maybe reach out to them and start a conversation via social media or via email, and maybe have this Zoom situation. You can have a cocktail with anyone, you know, but, you know, or call any one of us, you know, but we can, it's just, take your time. Take your time.
And
Sorry, go ahead, Mikhaile.
I think oftentimes, sometimes people might be intimidated by the actual price tag of artwork. But I think people also need to remember that the artists who are creating this work, what you're paying for is the years of experience that it took to develop the skill to be able to produce the work. And that the artwork is a part of this artist's practice. This is their profession, and it's a part of their livelihood. So bear that in mind when you do see the price tag. It's an investment, yes, but this is also a part of the artist's livelihood. And then also the other thing is, you don't have to pay. You can, oftentimes you can negotiate with galleries, and you can set up a payment plan if the full cost of a work is hard to chew at once. You can sit down with Lauren and say to Lauren, you know, I can't necessarily pay $5,000 outright, but if we can talk and discuss a payment plan, and then perhaps I could pay you five payments of 1,000, or whatever the situation might be. Oftentimes we can work with you. So I just want folks to think about work in that regard as well when you're starting out the collection process. Mm-hmm.
Mikhaile, there's a question from George Fishman here about how you navigate between bringing new artists on board and maintaining a connection with those who you've featured in the past. What are some of the new themes that you may be emphasizing this year?
Oh, okay, well, that's a tripartite question, or two-section question. Okay, so the first part is we're very lucky that we have been able to maintain the relationships with artists that we've worked with in the past. I like to call them Prism alumni. So there are some artists that we literally have been working with since the beginning of the art fair. They've never skipped a year. You know, they come back and they work with us every single year. And then, you know, I do my due diligence, like Dejha mentioned studio visits. I literally do studio visits all the time. I'm in between browsing the internet, in between talking to friends. Oftentimes I have a very explorative nature. So if I go abroad and I visit a space, that's the first thing I do before I even get on the plane is research which artists are there, which artist residency spaces are there. And like sometimes I will just walk through a city and find things that I like and have conversations with the proprietors of the space and ask them, are there any art galleries here where I can find artists? I just talk to people. And so oftentimes that's how I find and or discover new talent. And then I basically just add them to the group of alumni that we do have. And you know, as you mentioned, with regard to theme, every year we have a different focus for the fair. So last year was Love in the Time of Hysteria, which in this moment seems prescient, but this year it is Noir Meditations on African Cinema and its influence on visual art. So this year we are thinking about how the visual arts landscape or practices are influenced by imagery that you might see in African or diasporic film. So we have artists who are presenting new media work. For instance, you have artists like Rodell Warner, who does like these really interesting video montages of people from the Caribbean or even ancestors, Ethiopian ancestors, African ancestors, with this sort of digitized halo. I like to think of it as a halo, but it reminded me of imagery from films from Africa that I have seen, and so I thought that was an interesting inclusion in the fair. And then there's another artist from, and I have to actually pull up the artist's name because it's a mouthful. But she is from Africa. I'm gonna, give me 1 second. I want to pronounce her name correctly. Madeleine Kosi Mavenger. She's from South Africa, and she does these prints. She was actually a studio artist with William Kentridge. So you actually see a lot of William Kentridge's influence in the prints and in the work. And so there's a piece in the fair that reminds me of a scene from Mother of George, which is a film that was produced by Bradford Young. And so that was part of my thinking when I select that work for the fair. So I hope that helps answer the question. And by the way, as well, I also want to shout out William Cordova, because William Cordova, who has been a co-curator of the fair for the past, I want to say 4 years now, him and I go back and forth about thinking about how to frame the selections of the artwork every year. And so this year in our conversations, he was the one who came up with the idea for the theme of this year's fair. And then from there, we collaboratively developed the curatorial framework and selected the work, and invited artists to submit works that spoke to that focus.
You know, we had an entire additional section about talking community reserved for this talk, but we're already almost at time. And I think this just means we have to keep on doing this as many times as we can and more often. I just want to reserve the next 5 minutes, or rather the last 5 minutes, for any questions anyone may have, either for Mikhaile, Lauren, Tiana, or myself. Feel free to just jump in or put them in the chat if you're shy.
Hi, this is Halima. Lauren invited me, and this has been absolutely wonderful. Several of you talked about studio visits. How does someone find out about when or where these studio visits happen?
So I can help with that. Where are you based?
DC.
DC. So I think, you know, like Miami, there's a lot of different art centers and artist in residency programs that'll often have open studio days. So what you'll want to do is look at residency programs in your city and see when those open studios are. The other thing that you can do is when you meet an artist whose work you like, or rather when you meet an artist, you can do the thing that I always do, which is, I'd love to see your work. Where can I see it? And chances are that the artist will either invite you to the gallery if there's a show, or they may invite you for a studio visit. The other thing that I do is that when I'm traveling and I know I'm going to be in a city, I check in with the artists whose work I'm interested in, and I just message them. Sometimes it's via email, sometimes it's even a note in their DMs saying, hi, I love your work. I'm very passionate about what you do. Do you do any studio visits? If so, I'm going to be in town during these dates. Would it be possible to stop by and have a conversation? What were you going to say, Tiana?
Oh, I just wanted to respond to DC directly. If you're in DC, please visit my friends at Eaton Workshop. I know it's a hotel, but their art program run by Sheldon Scott is incredible. And it's a great way to plug into an art community that's local in DC, that is cutting edge contemporary. They're having incredible conversations, and it's a really great, open and fun way to start.
Absolutely. And I'll also add to the DC connection. Well, I guess it's Baltimore, but Baltimore is not too far from DC. One of the galleries that's participating in the fair is based in Baltimore. Her name is Mertice Berdola, and she actually represented Amy Sherald before Amy Sherald became the renderer of Michelle Obama. So she's a great resource as well. And then also in Baltimore is a studio called Sunspot, which is a residency program that Takala Keaton, he's a real estate guy based in New York, but he bought I think he bought some property in Baltimore, and it's being run by oh gosh, her name is I think her name is Tiffany, but she's a curator that graduated from MICA, and she brings in a number of really great artists to the program.
So I think Valine has a question about the piece behind me. This one over here. This is actually by Farshad Farzankia, who's an Iranian artist, but who lives in Copenhagen. Interestingly, I saw his work with my partner at Untitled a couple of years ago. It was the last day. We absolutely loved the work, and we were able to speak to the Gallerists and acquire it just a few minutes before the fair closed. So that's another kind of, way to approach things, is like shop at the fairs, right? At least if you're willing to let it go, if you're willing to see it out, right, then you can do that. If you must have it, right, then that's a whole different setup. But you can always circle the artwork that you're really interested in. And in the physical space, that international and national dealers don't want to be carrying the inventory back. So often, right, because my partner and I are very price conscious and think about these things, right? We'll see, we'll put in our bids early and then keep on going back, keep on checking up on our babies. And in this instance, we were able to get the Farshad. Well, I think we're at time. Any parting words, Tiana, Lauren, Mikhaile?
I just want to thank you all so much for inviting me to speak. I'm so happy to see some friends I haven't seen in a long time, and my Miami family here. And just go to check out Prism, their art fair. Make sure you check out Commissioner. Make sure you check out Tiana's site. So we're all supporting each other. That's what we're about. We're about collecting each other's and supporting each other, and that's how we're preserving our culture. At the end of the day.
And I will echo Lauren's sentiments. I'm thankful that everybody has joined us tonight. I think there was just one quick question about the availability of the talks beyond tonight. So all of the conversations that we're having will be available in the program panel of our website. So as soon as the recording of this talk is available, I'll be adding the link to the rightful place in the program menu, so you can always refer back to it.
I just want to say thank you, ladies, for making sure that we all come together. We create a space for people to learn and be open. I'm always honored to be in community with you guys and support Prism. That's the beginning and end of it. Mikhaile, thank you, and Dejha and Lauren, you guys are amazing. Keep doing the hard work.
And finally, thank you all for joining us. Keep coming back. I put all of our links in the chat, and go see Prism. All right, bye y'all.
Bye ladies.